Hello, Tim. Can you hear me? Okay.
I saw Carla and her mom the other day, and we were talking about Corey, being in touch with Corey. So, and it was great talking to Mrs. Nolan again.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Seems to be doing okay.
yeah. She's hanging in there. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's a trooper.
Yep. Yep.
So they probably told you that Corey he had COVID 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. He had a
Well,
case. I think he had pneumonia, but all recovered now. So
that's good news.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I didn't say anything.
huh?
Okay.
It's Tie Monday and I forgot mine.
Don't let it happen again there.
Bill, Tim. Well, I'm not on the memo distribution. How you doing, Dan?
Great. How are you, Don?
Pretty darn good. I'm gonna go hot up my tea while everybody gathers.
That'll be great here as soon as I get myself.
Mute myself so that people don't have to listen.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? Anybody? There we go. Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the January 25th, 2021 regular city council meeting. I would like to ask the city clerk to please call the roll.
Darcy Long Curtis,
Present.
Tim McLaughlin,
Present.
Rod Runyon,
Present.
Scott Randall,
Present.
Dan Richardson.
Present.
Item 3 is the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everybody please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? There is a flag in the conference room where our city manager is sitting. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item 4 is approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move approval of the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I can second. That's Tim McLaughlin.
It's been moved by Councilor Long Curtis and seconded by Councilor McLaughlin to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 5 is presentations and proclamations, and 5A is we're going to hear a report from our beautification committee, and the president or chair of that committee is Tiffany Prince. I see she is here. So Tiffany, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you all hear me?
Yes, very good.
Great. Okay. So again, thank you for having me, City Council and the Honorable Mayor. I'm here to provide a report. I'm going to try to be brief. I know my time is 15 minutes and maybe I'll go faster. So I wrote some stuff. So if I'm looking down, that's why. So presently, we originally started with 7 members on the committee and we are now down to 6. We did have 1 member move out of the city. So at the present time, our membership is 6. The beautification committee, we may want to fill that vacancy, but we haven't discussed this matter yet. We are going to discuss it and then we will provide our thoughts to the mayor for his consideration. So right now our membership is Max, Bill, John, Connie, Judy, myself. All of those, if you need last names, we can provide those if they're not already provided. Most of the reports and most of what I'm going to go over has been provided at length. So I'm just here to give you that high level quarterly report out and allow the opportunity for you to ask me any questions or just have any discussion if needed. So in the package, there's kind of that outline and I'm going to just go over that stuff. So first up, and sorry, my dog's chewing on her bone here. So the first up is the welcome signs. So this project originally came from the mayor as something, if feasible, he hoped that we could initiate research and complete some work on. And as I shared at my last update, which was a while ago because of COVID, we would ultimately be giving this work to City Council for final decision. Since that meeting, we have made some great progress and we have solidified 2 site locations, which have been provided in your packet. We will continue to keep City Council updated on the progression as we move on this. Down the line, when it's appropriate, we will request designated presentation time on the City Council agenda regarding this specific topic. Once all that research, design work, cost estimates are closer to completion. Because if this project is approved by City Council, then it will need to be incorporated into whatever that fiscal year budget will be, whenever that is. Up next is the tree plan. It is our intent to provide some additional information regarding the livelihood and importance of trees in our town, and especially downtown. Initially, we were going to explore and recommend a tree plan, but under further investigation, Bill found that one had already been done. That tree plan and that historical document from, I believe, 1994, if I remember correctly, that is in your packet as well. So we understand that you have a goal setting session coming up later this week or month. And we just hoped that you would review the past efforts made to the tree plan. And with knowing that the beautification committee's willingness to help on this project, that maybe we would receive some guidance and support in moving forward from city council in the near future, and hopefully implementing some of this past work. The Lou project, and that one was just presented to you all last. After much work, Judy presented the Lou project for City Council's consideration. I attended that meeting and was very excited and pleased to see that this project was picked up by you all in some capacity. The Beautification Committee looks forward to what's to come with this project, and we remain available shall the need arise. Another lengthy part of your packet was pressure washing downtown. So there's an extensive report in your packet regarding this specific topic. So I'm just going to be providing the most recent update that I received. So this came from Judy today, that Main Street has come across a grant that looks like this project will fit well for. The deadline to apply is February 3rd. So Main Street is going to be acting as fast as they can, and we hope that they will have great success. They will be in contact with the city manager and Public Works through the grant writing phase. And then if more information is to come on that, we will update. Community cleanups, that's the next one. Community cleanups are hosted by the Beautification Committee and Columbia Gorge Toyota. These take place once a month, March through November. They're on the second Saturday, and they're an effort to clean up and keep the Dalles clean and beautiful. We are in the works to find partner organizations to join forces with us for a larger team effort. And as always, you all are welcome to join us at any community cleanup, and we can provide that information if needed. Stop the Drop. So when I last presented to you all, I shared big goals around the Stop the Drop campaign. A lot of work was put into this project, a lot of work by Connie, and many varied aspects. It just was a lot of work. And so a lot of these aspects had to do with community events, schools, K-12, and due to COVID, a lot of that project had to be tabled. We have not given up on it. This project is still very important and still very near and dear to us. We still host the community cleanups. However, when our town is in a different phase due to COVID, we will pick this back up. So that hasn't gotten lost. It's on timeout. Something else that you probably have already noticed, hopefully, is in addition to the welcome sign work that John has been doing, we noticed some emphasis could be put onto the east side. Welcome to historic downtown, the Dalles, on the east side, across from where Precision Auto and Alpine and Sunshine Mill is. There's a sign. So we had some lights installed on that brickwork that really makes that pop at night. So if you haven't checked it out, you should do a little cruise or a little walk through and see it. It really makes it stand out. And last is the vote fountain. And this was a big part of my last presentation as well. It still is working. It's in hibernation for the winter months, but it still very much operates. Water is still flowing. The red rock has been removed, and pavers now surround the entire path and walkways at the Cirrhosis Rose Garden, as most of you already know. And this was largely made in collaboration with the Lions Club, and we are very gracious to them. The main scope of that project is completed, and we are tying up some loose ends with potential security cameras for that area as we officially close that one project. So the Beautification Committee, we meet twice a month. We've changed this since the last time. We now meet the first and third Wednesdays of the month at 5:30. You all or any community member are welcome to listen in or even participate in a subcommittee. If you're interested, you can contact the city clerk for more information. And I'm also here to discuss any projects in the works or future potential projects. And I'm happy to discuss or answer any questions that any of you might have. And that's that.
Tiffany, I noticed there's at least 3 members of your committee here. I'd like to recognize them, and I think there's 3. When I call your name, if you would raise your hand. I see Judy Merrill is here. There she is. And Connie Krumrick is here. There she is. And Bill Lennox is here. Bill?
Oh, hello.
Thank you. Thank you for the great job you guys are doing. You've been very active, and while the COVID crisis has certainly put a damper on a lot of things in this community, it's kind of slowed you guys down, but you're still going great guns, and I appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions for Tiffany or comments?
I have one question, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, Councilor Richardson.
Tiffany, Chairwoman Prince, first of all, congratulations on the work that you are doing on the committee there. It's an impressive sort of array of projects, and I appreciate that. Just as a citizen, thank you. One question for you is, well, one comment is I like the sign project that you guys are working so diligently on. One question I have is whether it's possible to consider not 2 signs, but 3. Your locations are really west side and then sort of the middle of town, central the Dells. I'm wondering if it's possible to consider adding a location to the east side, east end, for instance, perhaps at the intersection of Route 30 and Highway 141, where there's a very large paved sort of triangle of just open paved space. That might be an ideal location.
So yes, I have this written down and I will follow up, but I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, that location was more or less ruled out because of we wouldn't be able to work with the ODOT that we're working with here is locally based, and they kind of were able to say, yes, you can have this location, yes, you can have that location, because that's a historic kind of highway, and because that highway goes through downtown, the rules and regulations are different, and it's a lot harder to get that approved by ODOT. I've got it written down though.
That is not at all a critique. I appreciate the work that you're doing, and that was just an honest question whether that was a possibility or not. Does not dampen my enthusiasm for the other 2 signs. So carry on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Tiffany, thank you very much. And also thank you to Connie, Judy, and Bill for attending. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the audience participation. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject which does not later appear on the agenda. 5 minutes per person will be allowed. If a response by the city is requested, the speaker will be referred to the city manager for further action. The issue may appear on a future meeting agenda for city council consideration. Citizens are encouraged to ask questions with the understanding that the city can either answer the question tonight or refer the question to the appropriate city staff, who will get back to you within a reasonable amount of time. Is there anybody that would like to address the city council at this time? I see Don Warren has raised his hand. Mr. Warren, you have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. And for recognizing that I'm probably doing Main Street for the 5 minutes. So Tiffany and the rest of the beautification committee, looking forward to working with you. And Sarah Mall is on this call. If you see Lily or Sarah's name, that's her. The Travel Oregon grants, there's a $250 million pool of money that they'll be passing out in grants sized from $10,000 to $50,000. So we currently have on our list, and give us a shout if you want us to apply for any others, more pedlets. So we'll be asking for the max $50,000 to see if we can get that to build another 6 pedlets, sidewalk bypasses. And then we're also going to be writing a grant for the $20,000, which is just a bit more than the 18 plus that Julie gave us as the estimates from one of the contractors for the sidewalk pressure washing for downtown. And we're also going to put together a grant for the max 50,000 for the Portland Loo to see if we can get that money made available. Travel Oregon wants these all to be shovel ready projects. So from what I see, it's about $100,000 to land the Portland Loo here, and that doesn't count hooking up water and sewer. So we'll work with you guys to figure out if that's something we could go for, if you have a different grant that you'd like to have us look into instead. So that's the beautification committee work and those projects for Travel Oregon. Let's see, we sent the quarterly report off to Julie's. That might have ended up in the files. Our fine city manager, Ms. Julie Kruger. Hi, Julie. And let's see what else. Shop local was one of the big things. So we had prizes, and there was about $110,000, $120,000 worth of retail purchases that people submitted their names with to be in the weekly prize drawing package. We're probably going to fire that back up again to see what we can do to help stimulate downtown trade. Retail seems to be doing okay from the business owners that we've talked to, but it never hurts to keep helping with that. We're nearly complete with the neon sign project. We just have to hook up the electricity, but we made by the skin of our teeth our fourth and very last extension on that particular grant from One Main Financial to get 4 neon signs up. We should have them lit soon. Don, I sent you a whole raft of pictures so you can share those with whoever. And we're still working on the Wall Dogs 2022. So we moved that out by a year because we figured that we won't be able to have a big everybody and their brother in the streets having fun, eating food, listening to music, and seeing 15 new murals painted in 2021. So we moved that out by a year. And we're in process of replacing some of the failed light strings in the downtown lights. And Sarah's working with the Dow's Art Center, Meadow Outdoor, and local downtown businesses to promote children's art in partnership with something that Scott Stevenson's doing at the Art Center. We are looking for board members. We had a couple that wanted to make sure that Main Street was above reproach as they work to participate in Open Oregon Now. So Bill and Todd aren't on the board anymore. We have 3 people that will be voting on soon. And if you have any friends that want to be part of Main Street and are volunteer oriented, bring them on. I must be getting close to 5 minutes, Mr. Mayor. And so I'll close off with the last one as a reminder that over the next 18 months or so, I fully expect the federal government to put together infrastructure funding, not just out of the 1.7 or 1.9 billion that may or may not come out of economic stimulus that they're putting together now. But one of the things that I was talking with Carolyn Wood about, Chris Zukin, some other people in town that are involved with projects in the past where they had defined, estimated from contractors, large projects are ready to go and shovel ready when infrastructure money came available from the federal government. A couple of suggestions there are traffic calming bulb outs with big trees, maybe on 2nd and 3rd Street at the non-lit intersections where traffic calming would be appropriate. And then, what can we do to find some opportunities for secondary wastewater treatment plant at the west end of town? So maybe in the future we can expand and replace that to open up more of the downtown for commercial real estate, for mixed use residential. Talking with someone else about a big one. I don't know if they'll be able to get an infrastructure project to move the railroad closer to the highway so we get no railroad tracks blocking that part of town to fill in. And what can we do for second floor downtown live, work, and play? Currently, there's some speed bumps for getting utilities upgraded for people that want to build out living in the second floor of their downtown buildings. That's $60,000 to $100,000. So how can we help get rid of that speed bump so these projects actually occur? That's my list. Thank you for your time and attention. Holler if you need me.
Thank you, Don. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Warren? I don't see any hands raised. So thank you very much. we're still under audience participation. Is there anyone else who would like to address the city council? I see Corliss Marsh is raising her hand. Ms. Marsh, please proceed. You have up to 5 minutes.
Okay, this is Corliss Marsh. I just wanted to make the council aware and anybody else that is listening in that Wasco County Cultural Trust Coalition has grant applications out. Deadline is February 1, and it's on our website at wascoculturaltrust.org.
Thank you, Corliss. Could you give us your address for the record, please?
1401 East 21st Street.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to address the city council? Okay. Next is item 7, city manager's report. Ms. Julie Kruger, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. Just a couple quick items tonight. I wanted to let you all know that we were successful in completing our agreement with Mid-Columbia Community Action Council to manage and operate the homeless site with the city. It's about a 3-year contract with renewals so that they know that the property will be available to them for upcoming years as they budget and plan. So that was exciting to get finished. And then I have one question for all of you. I know when we originally were talking about that site, it was only for the shelter units and the one trailer and the portable toilets, but I do have a request from Kenny LaPointe about putting in 2 or 3 picnic tables and a canopy so that when the meals come in, it's easier to serve them to the people in the inclement weather. So I thought I would ask if anyone has any objections to that, and if not, I could let him know that he could put some picnic tables there.
Okay, so you're requesting the council give you some feedback on to allow the additional structure or whatever you want to call it.
Picnic tables and just a canopy to keep the rain off.
Right. Anybody have any problem with that? Anybody? I see 3 shaking of heads and a shrug.
No objection.
And,
No.
okay, I think you've got the blessing of the city council.
Okay, thank you very much. I just didn't want to go against anything that have you be surprised that there was something new out there. So I will let him know that that's okay. And that's all I have for my report tonight, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for keeping us informed on what's going on. Next is the city attorney report, Mr. Kara.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. Well, since our last time, I've attended a few other public meetings, including the airport board meeting with a tour by airport manager David Rasmussen, which was fantastic. Just getting out there as a fan of aviation was incredible. I highly encourage everybody here on the board or on the council to attend as well. I know that David's expressed an interest in getting the council out there to see what's going on at the airport. I know it's just right over the bridge, but not too far of a distance. More recently, I attended the Planning Commission meeting where our Community Development Director discussed planned updates to our code to ensure some consistency with some new state laws that are coming out. It's a very involved process and they're doing an amazing job. And just like I encourage anybody out there to take a tour of the airport, I also encourage you, members of the council, everyone else in the public to attend some of these meetings if you find yourself with a burning desire for more civic engagement, if Monday night meetings aren't enough. And that's it for my report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. City council reports is item 9. Why don't we first take care of item 9A, which is appointment of council to committees. In January of each 2-year cycle, each city council member is being assigned to two committees this year, no more, no less. These assignments are on page 35 of your packet. I have discussed these assignments with each of you, got your preferences. And with that, I'm looking for a motion to approve the assignments for 2021.
This Rod, I'll make a motion to approve.
Mr. Mayor, this is Dan. I would second that.
It's been moved by Council Runyon and seconded by Council Richardson to approve the mayor's city council member assignments for 2021. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, it's time for the city council reports. We'll start with the first picture I see, and it's Councilor Richardson.
Nothing of substance to report, Mr. Mayor, just a few conversations and sort of an ongoing getting up to speed on my part and slowly reading through a few documents. And that's about it. Nothing else of substance from me this past week.
Thank you. Councilor Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On Monday, January 18th, I met with Mayor Mays to review and discuss the various agreements with Google and their current status and what to expect going forward. This morning, I spoke with the city manager and Mayor Mays about the recent criminal activity in the city that took place over the weekend. Specifically, a violent home invasion that resulted in the victim being hospitalized, and also a nonviolent but equally offensive home invasion that resulted in an arrest. We exchanged some information and views on these events, and I am confident our law enforcement agencies will apprehend those responsible and hold them accountable for their actions. That is all.
Thank you. Councilor Runyon.
There we go. Just a few things here, and I agree with Councilor Randall 100% and have many questions that'll be reserved for another time. On the 14th, I attended the town hall with Representative Bonham and Finley, another Zoom meeting that they've been doing on a regular basis just prior to the legislature getting underway. On the 15th, the Gorge Economic Forum was held via Zoom. It's usually a well-attended public event, and it was well-attended as far as Zoom goes, but never the same as when they have it either at the Civic or down at Stevenson at the facilities there. Eyeball to eyeball is always better, but it was a good report, and they had a number of interesting speakers on the economy and the Gorge from one end to the other, including the CEO of the Freem Brewing Company out of Hood River and the owner of, well, I should say the CEO of the company that owns the Hood River Inn and a number of other facilities, both restaurants and gas stations along the Gorge. So it was quite interesting. And I think all of it's available online as well. Met with the mayor on the 15th on the same things regarding Google and past contracts and whatnot. And one's going forward, hopefully. On the 22nd, the League of Oregon Cities held another leadership conference. They do these weekly, and generally it's about COVID and health responses. And many of these topics have had several days to hit the news, but Oregon meeting a goal currently of 12,000 doses per day, fourth lowest case totals in the nation. Oregon is having to lower its is having lower than expected COVID numbers currently, and Oregon reported they were number one in the nation for vaccine administration. Yet it's still a little slow getting out in some areas. Governor's press conference also during that time and or a little bit after that meeting. And I watched through that, changing priorities. There's been a lot of talk on the news, putting teachers, educators first, ahead of seniors and different age groups and whatnot. And that'll all be coming together in the coming weeks. Let's see, the last thing was also on the 22nd, busy day that day. The League of Oregon Cities and the Department of Revenue had a seminar on lodging taxes and collection by the DOR. And I don't think we utilize that at this point, and I don't know that it's a good idea or not what they proposed for our community. It is good for some communities, but they are changing their entire framework about how they do that for the communities and counties that they do the collections for. And I sent that information on to our city manager, and I believe she passed that on to Angie, and everybody's got it all internally. And that was my week.
Thank you, Councilor Runyon. Councilor Long Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm down at the site and someone's knocking on the door, so I might hear some background noise. I apologize for that. The new shelters, it went up the day after our last city council meeting. And so we now have a total of 18 units. They were put in on January 12th and 13th. We currently have 30 residents out of 36 slots, and I don't anticipate having more unless something changes, just because those 6 units really need to be single units because the people in them have various mental health needs that require that. This coming Wednesday, we're going to be doing a point in time count, which is a count of our homeless population. That's led by Mid-Columbia Community Action. Normally, we would count everyone. We'd go out to camps, encampments, and count, but because of COVID, they're only doing a shelter count this year. So we're actively working on that. Because of my work at the shelter, I did qualify for the coronavirus vaccine. And I just want to report to people that are nervous about that, that it went very efficiently with our public health department. And I didn't have any severe adverse reactions at all to the injection. And I have had an anaphylactic reaction in the past to a regular flu shot. I met with the mayor talking about the enterprise zone agreements with Google, and I attended the Bonham and Findlay Town Hall as well. I participated in a webinar called the 2021 Eviction Crisis, Is Your Community Prepared? And I actually, after watching that webinar and doing some other research, I'm not really convinced that we are prepared for that here. And so I'm hoping that the City of the Dalles will work with their partners and actually come up with an actual strategic plan for how we're going to be using the money that's coming in from the state. Right now we're using a first come, first serve basis, and it's my belief that we need more of a triaged and intentional way of passing out that money to help both landlords and tenants. Wanted to report that the Gleaners are going to be passing out the Farmers to Families food boxes. They're not passing them out tomorrow, but they will start again on Tuesday, February 2nd. They pass those out at 10 o'clock across from Big Jim's, but the line does form quite a bit earlier. So I recommend, if you want a food box, to be sure to be there by 9 and maybe even a little bit earlier to line up. It's very popular and they only have a limited number. And that's my report.
Thank you. Councilor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. I did meet with you on the 15th as well to discuss the Google expansion. And I will defer the airport report until the next meeting. And on Wednesday, I have a meeting with Kenny LaPointe to talk about security cameras and management at the shelter, at least opening up the Wi-Fi. So that's my report for this week.
Thank you, Councilor McLaughlin. As far as my report goes, on the 15th, I attended the same Zoom seminar that Councilor Runyon sat in on about economic development. I agree that it was very, very good and got a lot of good information. I also, on the same day, attended a sort of a community interviews of the 3 finalists for the school district's superintendent of schools. There were 3 final candidates, and all 3 interviews were very interesting. Also, I believe that all 3 candidates interviewed with the full board over the weekend. On the 19th, I taped for the Chamber of Commerce, I taped a welcome speech for their Zoom annual banquet, which was held on the 21st. And on the 22nd, I'd like to congratulate the Chamber for a job well done. Under very adverse circumstances, they managed to put on a nice Zoom banquet, which was almost an hour long. And I thought it went very well. And my congratulations also to all the people that won the awards.
Cool.
On the 22nd, I also sat in on a conference call, a weekly conference call with the League of Oregon Cities. And that's my report. Okay, item 10 is the consent agenda. Items of a routine and non-controversial nature are placed on the consent agenda to allow the city council to spend its time and energy on the important items and issues. Any councilor may request an item be pulled from the consent agenda and be considered separately. Items pulled from the consent agenda will be placed on the agenda at the end of the action items section. There are 2 items on the consent agenda. One is the approval of the January 11th regular city council minutes. And the second one is a resolution regarding my appointment of John Frederick to the Urban Renewal Agency Board. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
This is Randall. I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Councilor Runyon is waving his hand. It's been moved by Councilor Randall, seconded by Councilor Runyon to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 11 is discussion of the final draft of the Employment Buildable Lands Report. And I trust Ms. Cannon will be giving the staff report. Is that correct?
Mayor Mays and members of council, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Don Hurt, our senior planner, and we have Matt Hasty, with whom you've met before. Will provide a short presentation summarizing where we've been with this study. So with that, I'll turn it over to Don and Matt.
Thanks, Alice. Thank you, Honorable Mays and councilors. Providing you tonight a report that of the completed final draft of the Employment Buildable Lands Inventory. In your packet, we also included a memo that was updated in October, our final draft, as well as meeting minutes from the November 19th, 2020 meeting. The November 19th meeting was actually a great meeting in that the Planning Commission took a look at staff's recommendations and ended up not taking a recommendation, which is fine, and ended up making a recommendation to City Council, which is what we are bringing to you tonight. So at this time, staff actually would like to provide you alternatives, and our recommendation would be the Planning Commission's recommendation to move and adopt the Employment Opportunity Analysis, Employment Buildable Lands Inventory, but not to actually implement the comprehensive plan at this time. And Matt Hasty from Angelo Planning Group is here to provide a short slideshow to field questions as well as answer some questions that you may have.
All right. Thanks, Don. Thanks, Mayor Mays and Council. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to just go through essentially kind of an abbreviated version of the presentation that I think probably most, if not all of you, saw at the joint work session with the council, as well as the Port Commission and the county board. So I'm going to keep it pretty brief because I think you've seen most of this before, and then I'll be happy to answer questions and respond to any comments you might have. So there we go. So just quick background. This was an inventory of commercial and industrial land within the urban growth boundary. It's phase 2 of the city's economic opportunities analysis. This work was consistent with state requirements and local conditions and information that we gathered during the process. Ultimately, it's intended to inform future economic development decisions. And there were a variety of products that we prepared as part of this process, an overall memo, several supporting memos, maps, and then the GIS data, which we also transmitted to the city for future use in updating the information. And just kind of a few comments about the process. We had a fair bit of review and refinement of this process, including meetings of a stakeholder advisory committee, additional individual meetings with the port and the county. We had a fair bit of, we had communication with representatives of Google to make sure that we were doing a good job of assessing the capacity of their sites for future employment. We consulted with state agency staff, particularly the Department of Land Conservation and Development, about how to address issues associated with specific sites within the inventory. And then as part of that process, multiple rounds of review and revision of the memos, the maps, and the data associated with the inventory. So just a few terms, because I'll use these in the next couple of slides. When we talk about developed land, we're talking about land that's developed for a specific use already and really has little to no additional capacity for future employment. Vacant land, vacant properties are those with minimal to no physical improvements, although in some cases, portions of those properties have some constraints related to resources, natural resources, or hazards or topographical issues. Partially vacant are those properties that have some improvements, but they have some capacity for additional development. When we say committed properties, we're talking about properties that are committed to a non-employment use. So we're not necessarily talking about properties that are committed to a future employment use that isn't yet developed on the site. And then constrained, I mentioned earlier, those are properties that either are completely or partially constrained by some kind of typically natural feature or hazard, floodplains, steep slopes, things of that nature. So again, we made refinements throughout the process to our assumptions about a number of specific sites. Again, we did this in consultation with the state and through looking at their specific rules and requirements. So we weren't able to kind of make changes, all the changes that were addressed or that were suggested during the process, but we made quite a few. And these were some of the things that the sites that we looked at and updated our assumptions on during the process. Sites owned by the port, the Lockheed Martin site, which we ultimately took out of the inventory, easements for BPA lines, we deducted those from the inventory. The Munson paving sites were deducted. We did not deduct or take the Walmart site out of the inventory. And we also did not take the Google sites out of the inventory, even though they're owned by that company and there are plans to develop them, they still have capacity for future employment, and in consultation with the state determined we could not, per state rules, take those out of the inventory. So that's just a map showing where some of these sites are. I'm sure you all are more familiar even than I am with where these are, but it just kind of gives you a sense of where those sites are. The college site down in the lower part of the screen was not ultimately included in the inventory given its status in terms of capacity and development, and then it's actually in a residential zone. This is just a map showing kind of where the vacant in green, partially vacant in yellow, which is a little hard to see, and there's not a ton of those partially vacant properties is, and then developed and committed are properties that wouldn't show up as having capacity in the inventory, but we showed them on this map to distinguish them. In terms of kind of the results, also I'll talk about the numbers first, and then I'll talk about some kind of observations or findings associated with the numbers. The upper table on your screen is just a more detailed table, and then the lower table kind of rolls up the results there. So I'm going to focus on the lower table. And this compares the amount of land in the inventory with the amount of land need that was estimated in the first phase of the city's economic opportunities analysis. So, and we show that both for commercially zoned properties and then for land zoned for industrial use. And the bottom line here is we're showing as a fairly small surplus of land for commercial use and a surplus of land for industrial use. And I'll talk more about some of the caveats and qualifications that go with that on the next slide here. And you'll see the estimated demand in the first phase of the inventory, or the first phase of the process, was identified as a range because they looked at a couple of different future employment projection scenarios. And so we then show the surplus or the deficit also as a range accordingly. So just kind of a few observations and findings. One, I mentioned that we, made sure along the way that our analysis was consistent with state requirements. We want to make sure that, if this is something you're adopting, that you're not at risk of appeal, or if it is appeal, that should withstand appeal because it is consistent with those requirements. As I noted, we did show a surplus of employment land. And because of that, this analysis in and of itself does not provide the basis, the factual basis for a UGB, an urban growth boundary expansion. However, we noted in the report that this is looking at your overall employment land needs over the next 20 years. Generally, what you'd need to support future employment growth for commercial businesses and industrial businesses. To the extent you were to identify an unmet need for a specific type of site that is not available within the UGB, beyond or outside of this process, there is the possibility to identify that need, but that's not something we identified here. Also want to point out, and this is not a surprise to anyone, that the industrial land supply is really dominated by those large sites that are already owned and planned for development, essentially the Google sites. They make up approximately 127 acres of that 175 acres in the inventory that's zoned for industrial use. So that's a pretty large portion of that. Somewhat similarly, of the commercial land, that Walmart site makes up accounts for 38 net acres. That's kind of after we've taken out potential land needed for right-of-way uses on that site. It makes up 38 acres of the 86 acres we identified in the inventory. So those sites do make up a lot of the supply there. And so what that means on the flip side is you do have a limited supply of land that's sort of more traditionally considered available or marketable for other users within the city. And so I think that's, you all know that's an important thing to point out here. The other thing just to note is there is a larger regional supply of land when you think about some of the land across the river in Dallasport, but that land is not included in this inventory or in any of the numbers I showed you earlier because it's not within your urban growth boundary. So those were some of the findings that we highlighted in the report. And that's it for my presentation. And I'm gonna, unless people want me to keep the presentation up on the screen, I think I'll stop sharing it and be happy again to take questions from y'all.
Thank you, Matt.
Can I jump in really quickly, Mayor, before we do the questions?
Sure.
I just want to clarify, if I may, about the recommendations. Staff's recommendation before we went to the Planning Commission, and it remains our recommendation, is basically why we're here. Why were we here? We're here to wrap up this project. We're here to get some direction from you as to what to do with these results. It's been certainly there's been a lot of public interest in this. So we want to make sure that the council is giving some really current and good direction on what we do with this data. So staff's recommendation was there is a little bit of land left controlled by a few. And with that known, maybe the best course of action would be to just call timeout and place this on hold for a couple of years to determine what the results might be in 12, 24, 36 months. And then we can dust off the numbers and bring it back for your consideration as to whether we adopt it. The really urgency around adopting it is around if it really warrants moving, if it justifies moving the urban growth boundary, then we have analysis that will kind of make a difference. As for now, this report doesn't do that. So that's why we recommended putting it on hold for now. The Planning Commission felt differently. Their recommendation was that they believe there's value in adopting the data so that we can use the data as good information to tell a story about our community. Personally, as a staff member, I couldn't argue with that recommendation. again, it doesn't result in a move of the urban growth boundary, but their point is that if it's adopted, it's more usable as an adopted document. We are not recommending either Planning Commission or the City Council to incorporate this data into our comprehensive plan until a little bit later. So it would be an adopted document and it would be there and available to us, but not kind of folded into the policies of our comp plan quite yet. So with that, that just concludes the recommendations. I wanted to summarize that for you quickly, and I'll let you take it from here, Mayor.
Thank you, Alice. Does anybody have any questions for the staff or our consultant?
I have one. Probably have more. I see this listed as a discussion item only, not an action item tonight. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. I think it's very key in light of some of the meetings that the council has had independently over the last week or so that we have a real chance to ask some other questions on things that are not ready for public consumption at this point. So discussion is all I'm willing to do tonight. I may have some other questions, but I'll defer to the other councilors.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for the staff or for the consultant?
I have a question.
Councilor Long Curtis.
Yes. So this buildable lands, just so people understand, can someone confirm that this is really about industrial and then commercial that's buildable? It doesn't really address like infill on commercial, correct?
It does, to the extent that there are commercial properties that have some improvements or development on them, but they have the capacity for additional development due to the size of the parcel and the zoning of the parcel. So when I mentioned the partially vacant land, that does include some properties that are that again have some capacity for additional development, but do also have a use on them now. So, and I'd have to kind of look at the data more closely to tell you how many of those there are, or what size or how much development potential there might be on a given property. But it does include some potential properties with what you could consider infill potential.
Okay. And so if we decided not to implement the comprehensive plan at this point, I don't understand what the benefit of that is, because that doesn't move the city forward with determining who we are and what our economic opportunities are. And we're in the middle of a pandemic and we've had a lot of trouble with our economy here. And I'm thinking that this is a time to decide if we're going to be industrial primarily, or if we're going to start looking toward other aspects of building up our town. And I think the longer we delay in accepting this report, which we don't like it, but it follows the state rules. And I just don't understand what delaying accepting it does for us, what benefit there is.
You're muted, Alice.
Sorry, I've just muted myself. I don't know why I did that. Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Long Curtis, thank you for the question. I think you make a good point, and also that was the same point that the Planning Commission made, which was if you adopt the data, you have it, you can do something with it. I think our belief as a staff was that our results might be different in a year or 2 years. And at that time, let's update it and see if we're in a closer position to move the urban growth boundary at that time. Now, doing that doesn't address the issues that you are raising, which is the broader picture of our community and identifying what it is we want to be. So I can't dispute what you just said, and I think that gives a good reason to adopt it in some form. I guess we don't at this time really want to spend a lot of time, unless it's part of a broader community visioning work. We don't necessarily want to fold all those numbers into our comprehensive plan at this time and go into that long exercise into our policies themselves. That's a lot of work to do for something that might change again in a year or two, but there's no harm in having the document adopted, and that way it will be recognized by the state.
Thank you. That helps me understand that it's a lot of work to put it into the comprehensive plan. So thank you for clarifying that.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just a comment. The report is good data, and Mr. Mayor, I guess I failed to understand why we would not recognize the realities on the ground that the report describes and adopt it in some fashion short of the comp plan, just in order to get on with planning and thinking about our own future based on these realities. You know, I guess I would feel that the main thrust or impact of the report is not with regard the urban growth boundary, which is more or less settled, at least for the time being, but just the rest of the planning and thinking about our community. It's a reality that we have, I guess the port essentially has sold about 70% of our available industrial buildable land to Google. That's a reality. I feel it's incumbent upon us to be facing that and working within that. And secondly, well, it makes good sense not to launch upon the work that incorporating this into the comp plan would entail. I wonder if some sort of soft commitment or understanding might be appropriate for us to think about updating the comp plan in the next 2 or 3 years.
Is that a question for the staff?
A question for whomever appropriate, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Mayor and Councilor Richardson, I think that's a very viable option, what you just described. And what we could do is we could initiate adoption of this report, and at that time offer up some recommendations and any policies we believe immediately that might need to be updated in our comprehensive plan as a result of this, but kind of refrain from doing a full incorporation, because we know, I think we all know in some ways that we're going to be the Dalles in 24, 36, 48 months from now. We will be different, and that's a good thing. I think that's a positive thing, and I think many of us believe we're going to recover from this time we find ourselves in. So we can support that and kind of follow along with what you just outlined.
Any other questions or comments? I have a couple here for either Ms. Cannon or Mr. Hasty. I want to make sure everyone understands, especially our newer counselors. Could you address how this report relates to any future request to the Department of Lands Conservation and Development to expand our urban growth boundary? Am I to understand that this is a requirement or a prerequisite for that request? Is that correct?
Generally, yes. If you were to pursue expanding your urban growth boundary, if you were to do that to meet future kind of general long-term needs for employment land, you would have to do this analysis and demonstrate that you had a deficit of land to meet those employment needs. So yeah, if you were to pursue that, you'd have to go through this analysis, which you've now done. But to get to a UGB expansion, you'd have to show a deficit of land. Now, there's more steps than that, because you'd have to look at, are there other ways, even if you showed an overall deficit of just employment land, you'd have to show there wasn't any other way to meet that within the existing urban growth boundary, through rezoning other land, et cetera. But at a minimum, you'd have to go through this kind of analysis to indicate, how much land you need and how much you have and whether or not there's a surplus or a deficit. So short answer, yes.
Okay. Ms. Cannon has suggested that if we wanted to, say, delay this for, say, 2 years, if Google was to end up, since so much of this vacant land is owned by Google, if they were to end up building on this vacant land in the next 2 years, for example, would we have to, before we would go to DLCD, wouldn't we have to amend this report or do another report or another analysis?
You would need to update the findings of the report. So you'd need to show and deduct the land that had been developed by Google, and that would essentially change the results of the comparison of land need and supply. So yeah, you would have to go through at least some kind of process to do that. It might not be, it certainly wouldn't take as much time or effort as what we did as part of this process, because now you have all that GIS data, you know where that capacity is. It will be a fairly straightforward thing, I think, to be able to update those numbers. But yes, again, short answer is yes.
Okay, so if Google, if they were to end up building on a lot of that acreage, it stands to reason that that acreage would come off of the vacant category, right?
That is correct. Yeah, it would be considered developed, so it would not be in the category of vacant or partially vacant. So yep, it would come out of those categories, and you would see that surplus that we're showing decrease accordingly.
Okay.
And yeah.
And with that in mind, and this is probably a question for Ms. Cannon, what do you think the chances are that the city would be in a position to go to DLCD and ask for an expansion of our urban growth boundary in the next 2 years?
Oh boy, I don't know that. Maybe that's a better question for Matt. That's, yeah, Mayor, that would, I guess I don't know enough about that process to know whether, but it seems like with today's results, the way they are, no, it wouldn't support a movement. We would need different data to support that.
Yeah, so the chances would be just about nil.
Right.
Right. Do you agree with that, Mr. Hasty?
I agree that right now the chances would be pretty much nil to get a UGB expansion. And the only thing I would say in addition to that is partly what Alice said, which is it's hard to say what you'd find in 2 years. It would depend, first of all, on how much land had been developed that's zoned for employment, but second of all, whether or not how much land was available for residential use and whether there was any opportunity to rezone land from some other designation to employment use to meet some of the deficit, because you would need to look at the entire land supply to some degree to show the need for, you first have to show you can't meet it within the UGB, and that's one of the things you have to look at. So I'm not going to try to speculate on sort of give you the odds on 2 years from now what you might find. Sorry.
Well, I just have, knowing what I do about the Gorge Commission and everything else going on, I'd have to agree that the chances of us going to DLCD for an expansion of our urban growth boundary is next to zero. Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Councilor Runyon?
If Tim has something, I'll let him go ahead. I'm just waiting for everybody to get their chance.
He's shaking his head.
No. On staff recommendation number one, the one thing that stood out that I wasn't really in favor of was putting a specific amount of time on it, the 1 to 2 year kind of thing. It seems very reasonable that we may see some activity in the next 6 months, a year, I don't know, but I would like to see a less captive line on there. Something, I don't know what it would be at this moment, something for the planning department to maybe come back with, since we're just doing discussion tonight. But I'd like to see something in maybe the next council meeting or the one after that about a change to that, to on hold for a material point to be made by the planning department. They could probably they could describe it certainly better than I could. I think if we put a specific 1 to 2 years on it. I think that might be a mistake there, but I'm willing to discuss that. And that's what I think I need the time for. And I have been through a couple of additions to comprehensive plans in about 16 years of this work. And I think, we have 2 new counselors that have not been around it. I think it would be important for them to understand what the timeline is on adding something to the comprehensive plan and the work involved by our staff. So again, in the Zoom world, it's just hard getting with people to ask questions sometimes, to sit down and talk, but I do think I need some more discussion on those elements. I'm a little bit, I'm still interested why the Planning Commission came to a different resolution, because except for the way that sentence ended in staff recommendation 1, I would be more in favor of that. And I know we've been at odds a couple of times now on Planning Commission decisions, and I hate to do that without a few more facts in front of me. So I don't know if any of that makes any sense. That's okay. But I'm just not there, and it's not an action item for tonight, so I wasn't prepared for it to go forward.
Mayor Mays, Councilor Runyon, just a quick response on this. I think maybe the best, I like your comment about not committing to a time frame at this time. There is a lot unknown, so I agree with you there. So maybe what we could agree to is to come and report back in a year or something like that, so that we could come back in another discussion item that would allow for us to have another discussion about what do we want to do with this document if you should decide at this time not to adopt. And I believe, just based on my presence at the Planning Commission meeting, that they would be supportive of that. If you were to decide not to adopt at this time, they would love the fact that you're so interested that you have a timeline around bringing it up again. I think that would be satisfactory to them. That's my belief.
Yeah.
Okay, so the suggestion I'm hearing is that, and I saw a couple of heads nod, that we take no action at this time and then ask the staff to report back to us. And I would suggest in no later than 1 year.
Yeah.
Could say 9 months to a year, something in there.
Well,
let's
say 3 months to a year. Let's have a report back and see where we are, because things aren't moving, and there are trails in the woods happening right now. Okay.
I would be a lot more comfortable, Mayor, with 6 months to a year, because 3 months will be here tomorrow. You know how that goes. But
good idea.
I suggested 9, but that's fine. Councilor McLaughlin?
6 months to a year sounds fine with me.
Okay. Councilor Long Curtis, Councilor Randall, you okay with that? Councilor Richardson?
No. I mean, this is a discussion item, but but they made recommendations, but we haven't we can't vote if it's just a discussion item. And I think we should adopt it, but not fully integrate it into the comprehensive plan, because I think there are advantages to that, especially with everything going on with COVID and the fact that I think our city needs to move forward.
Anybody else like to weigh in?
Mr. Mayor, I did not think that adoption into the comprehensive plan was really under discussion, or I didn't hear anybody urging that. If that was the take home from some of my comments, then I apologize. I was actually saying, no, I think we want to separately look at or talk about the timing for a comp plan update, just as a sort of conversation with ourselves and staff. That's a separate item.
Well, I'm hearing 2 opinions. One is that we go along with what the Planning Commission pretty much did, which is adopt the BLI and not implement the comprehensive plan, which I believe, Councilor Long Curtis, that's your position. And then I'm hearing from a couple of others that we not take any action and come back, have the staff come back with from 6 months to a year.
Mr. Mayor, what's the trigger for staff coming back?
I'm not sure there is a trigger. I think we set an arbitrary time and they would report back when they think it's, when there is a trigger. But somewhere between 9 and 12 months.
Mayor Mays, we and Councilor Richardson, we could provide a report on any development activity that's occurred since we last spoke. That might change the results of, that's what our report would provide for you. That would change the results of those that you heard today.
So you're suggesting if there's any significant development?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Does that answer your question, Dan?
I think so.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
you said you changed from 9 to 12 months, but it was 6 to 12 months is what we were looking at. And I don't have a problem with putting it on the calendar for 6 months from now, but what I would like to have happen in between now and whenever, if we want to meet in a month again, that's fine. Again, I had no intention of voting on anything tonight. It's listed as a discussion item. But I think we need to have some more information for a couple of our members at least, and I would like to be refreshed on what really is involved in getting into the comprehensive plan and the work that it takes with our staff and so forth. And I don't think that's too much to ask. I don't entirely disagree with Councilor Long Curtis either, but we weren't set up to vote on anything here tonight. So we have to have some sort of a delay here, whether the timeline I'm totally open to.
Yeah, I did err in suggesting 9 months, that when the consensus, at least from 2 or 3 of you, was actually 6 months.
Yeah, 3 was too short and 6 was just right.
Okay, anybody else want to weigh in? No?
Oh,
Okay, so Councilor Long Curtis, are you okay with waiting 6 to 12 months with the understanding that you would like to see some action taken at that time?
No. And, again, I don't understand why it's under, it seems like this is actually an action item because you're asking us to make a decision but it was listed as discussion. So I think probably what needs to happen is what Councilor Runyon just said is he wants some answers and wants council to fully understand what it means if it does get incorporated into the comprehensive plan. But we're going to need to put this on like the next agenda or something so we can actually take a vote on how we want to handle it.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, is that okay with everybody?
I don't have a problem with that. Procedurally, that's the way it should be.
Okay, do you feel like, Ms. Cannon, do you feel like you have sufficient direction from the city council at this time?
Mayor, yes, thank you.
Okay, great. We'll look forward to seeing this on either the February 8th or February 22nd agenda.
I'd say the end of February 1 would be a good one.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you all very much. And thank you, Mr. Hasty.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other business to come before the city council before we go into executive session? Okay, with that, I am now adjourning into executive session in accordance with ORS 192.6602E to conduct deliberations with persons that we have designated to negotiate real property transactions.